Okay, for the sake of time, I think we will go ahead and start. Hello and welcome to Jubilee Campaign's United Nations Commission on the Status of Women's side event, Overcoming Legal Hurdles to Women's Economic Empowerment in a Climate of Insecurity 5 years on. My name is Sydney Kochan and I'm the Government Relations and Special Projects Coordinator at Jubilee Campaign. Before I introduce our first speaker today, I would like to give you a background for today's event and the issues that we'll be discussing. The 66th session of the Commission on the Status of Women is convened to address the priority theme of achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls in the context of climate change and environmental and disaster risk reduction policies and programs. And the CSW 66 review theme is women's economic empowerment in the changing world of work. Moreover, the CSW 66 review themes emphasize the importance and necessity of women's voices, agency, participation, and leadership in securing the solutions for the challenges that women face. We have found that one of the most salient and timely threats to women and girls' economic empowerment is the climate of insecurity, which is fostered by discriminatory laws that deny women basic human rights. 1 year ago, Jubilee Campaign held a United Nations Human Rights Council side event, No One Left Behind, stemming abductions and forced conversion of marriages of religious minority girls and women, in which we highlighted the interwoven dimensions of religious persecution and gender discrimination in nations such as Nigeria, Pakistan, and Egypt, where girls belonging to faith minority communities are dually vulnerable to kidnapping and forced marriages. In the conclusions of the 61st session of the Commission of the Status of Women, it was noted that violence against women, including child, early, and forced marriages, are major impediments to the achievement of women's social and economic empowerment. Today's event will focus on the intersection of the persecution on basis of faith and discrimination on basis of gender, and we will also address both the priority review themes by discussing women's economic empowerment in the changing world of work and a climate of insecurity. Our first speaker today is Ms. Hélène Fisher, the Global Gender Persecution Specialist with Open Doors. Over the past decade, Ms. Fisher has tracked trends related to the often overlooked intersection of women and religious persecution. In 2018, she initiated and has since yearly co-authored the annual gender-specific religious persecution analysis reports for World Watch Research, utilizing novel technology which she and her co-author pioneered. Ms. Fisher is a co-founder of the Gender and Religious Freedom Platform within the Religious Liberty Partnership and has been invited to speak as an expert by the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief, the US Ministerial on International Religious Freedom, and various government bodies from the UK, Norway, and Denmark. We now welcome Ms. Fisher to share her remarks, although she will be providing a pre-recorded video.
Hello, everyone, and greetings, distinguished panelists and participants. It is such a pleasure to speak with you today. Well, we're here for this UNCSW event talking about overcoming hurdles. And there are so many hurdles when we are in this intersectional space between women's rights and freedom of religion or belief. I'd like to share and just offer a few general frameworks before we hear from our specific examples today. As we go through the next few minutes, I'd like to talk in three parts. And the first one will be looking at what hurdles to understanding intersectionality might be, which are basically the complexity. Looking at what the results of that intersection between FORB and women's rights looks like in real life. And finally, considering just a few hurdles to faith-based organizations and policymakers addressing this intersectionality together. So let's look at this first question about hurdles to understanding intersectionality. We all know that this is a fraught area between women's rights and freedom of religion or belief. And our organization has been investigating it for 5 years. We call it gender-specific religious persecution. And we see it as focusing on this intersectional space of their vulnerabilities and individuals' vulnerabilities. Now, on the one hand, the freedom of religion or belief side, they may be exactly the same for a man and a woman. On the other hand, in terms of the gender infringement, gender inequality space, you'll see that that arrow is much larger on the women's side. And as legal specialists, I don't need to tell you what the details of that are. In order to help understanding of this, we started using an image from, well, crime drama. The detective solves his crime very often by identifying motive, means, and opportunity, but is not fooled into thinking those three are the same things. The motive, for example, to do harm to somebody, could be to murder somebody, may be completely separate from the means. Therefore, this is whether somebody's killed with a gun or poison. One is highly visible, one is invisible, and they can be completely different than the desire, the reason that the person has been murdered. And then, of course, the individual looks for an opportunity. Now, that's perhaps a simplistic sort of analogy. We're very well aware of the fact that there are many exacerbating factors in real life in this intersectional space. Those exacerbating factors might be, for example, a complex motive. It's not just religious. There's also financial, political, or ethnic desires for dominance. The means may not just be gender vulnerabilities, but it could be financial need or displacement, etc. And the opportunity can be provided by proximity or criminal activity, militia, crisis. You know what these spaces are. Anyway, that's a little description of the general space. What do we find that this results in as we look at 50 different countries around the globe? Well, as I said, World Watch Research has been looking into this for the past 5 years. This is our current year's report. It's called Invisible. We have 4 others, and they're all available if you're interested in reading them and the methodology, etc., on the website that you see. If you have a special interest in children and youth, you can find them there as well. We've been talking since 2018 about what characterizes religious persecution for men and women. You'll see that it's quite different and that it will actually correspond quite well to gender vulnerabilities. Please note that women's side is hidden and complex, notably. In the 5 years of research that we've been doing this, we feel quite confident about what these differences are. These are the top 3 recurring points for those 5 years. One of the things that's similar is physical violence. And speaking of violence, these are the forms of violence that are typical for each gender. Those forms of violence very often are focused on hurting a man in his role as provider or church leader, but a woman in her perceived sexual purity and family status. I think we'll hear a lot of examples of that, and using that complexity of opportunities, vulnerabilities that you see in especially in those 3 quadrants of the graph. Well, all of this, even when we've understood it, we have to understand that there are actually hurdles to doing something about this that are caused by the intersectional nature of the dynamics. And that has to do with the inside of what happens to with faith-based groups. Because gender-specific religious persecution is most effective when the community agrees that these areas, these 4 areas, are actually what determine a man or woman's value, purpose, or acceptance in their community. Because actually they're so easy to damage from the outside. But if we agree that their value, purpose, or acceptance can be damaged, then we risk actually sending internal arrows of shame and blame and, well, distrust. And therefore, our faith-based organization isn't the restorative place that we'd like to imagine that it is. The organization that I work for has decided to directly address this. We're doing a program and have been working on this for a number of years now. It's called Restorations, and we're seeing really amazing responses. Participants are finding this is such a helpful way to negotiate that tricky conversation on gender norms and how it relates to faith. It's clarified for them what the synergy is, what the problems are, and most importantly, it's giving them theological permission to review programming or church activities with a gender lens. So I hope this gives hope for how local faith actors and policymakers can work together in strong synergy to provide protections and also grow resilience ourselves as a community. I know that we'll be talking about a number of things that we're hoping that policymakers would provide support on. These are the policy recommendations which we're making available from my organization, and I'm sure many of you have your own. Thank you so much for your time today, and wishing you all the best for your further conversations.
And although Ms. Hélène Fisher isn't here today to join us live, we would like to thank her for providing us with that presentation. Our next speaker is Ms. Fatima Njoku, lawyer and advocacy director of Stefanos Foundation based in Abuja, Nigeria. Stefanos Foundation is a human rights advocacy, relief, and rehabilitation organization that works to help victims of aggression and those suffering discrimination simply for being Christian in Nigeria. They provide intelligence gathering, leadership training, trauma healing, and services for internally displaced people camps. Stefanos Foundation creates awareness both locally and internationally on persecution of Christians and networks with other organizations such as the Christian Association Nigeria and other Christian ministries. Ms. Njoku, will turn to you now.
Thank you. Thank you, Sydney. Greetings to everyone. I'll be speaking about the hurdles to women empowerment in a climate of insecurity, but with specific reference to Nigeria. And so I'll be talking first about the background of insecurity in Nigeria. Nigeria is a country that is currently, bedeviled with a climate of insecurity, and not necessarily because of climate change, but because there is, a perceived, there's a perceived situation where government is not doing enough to allow criminal elements to stop what they are doing. Nigeria has grave insecurity. The root cause of the insecurity has been explained by various persons and groups as climate change. The frightening level of insecurity in Nigeria, which manifests as banditry, sometimes as violence and whole attacks on communities and persons, and abductions and all of that, general terrorism, have actually grown because there's a climate of impunity that has been allowed. It appears that the government has not been responsible enough and, alive to its responsibility to ensure that the welfare and security of the people are its priority. The people who do all the things, the banditry, the abductions, criminality, and all of that, continue to do so under different kinds of justifications like climate change. You find that in many climes like Japan, where they have a lot of climate change problems, we've not heard that they, go to other communities close to them or neighboring countries, attacking people, taking over their communities and all that. But then unfortunately, this is something that is happening in Nigeria. And unfortunately, even at the government level, sometimes climate change is used as a justification, whereas this is not supposed to be so. We find also that in Nigeria, a lot of roads are unsafe. People cannot travel because they can easily be kidnapped. They can easily be abducted for ransom. And many times when these things happen, the perpetrators are unapprehended. Monies are paid in millions of naira, yet they are not traced. These bandits, these headsmen, these criminals, whatever name or description that are used for them, are not apprehended. We find that even in our schools, our classes are not safe because children can be in school and then they can just be abducted in their numbers. For example, the popular Chibok abduction, we find that up till now, we've not heard of any prosecutions of anyone who has been, involved, or, the girls themselves have not even been recovered completely. Those that have been recovered, the people who abducted them have not been, apprehended at all. And so it makes it look like people can continue to do this kind of things and get away with it. We also find that the abductors or the Boko Haram, for example, which is one of the notorious gangs that everybody knows about, Boko Haram members have caused a lot of problems. They have caused heightened levels of insecurity in Nigeria. And you find that rather than apprehend these people and bring them to justice, you find that most of the times they are rewarded, rewarded in quotes, in the sense that the government has come up with a program that they said they are rehabilitating repentant Boko Haram. And repentant Boko Haram, repentant terrorists have no place in our law books. So we don't know what the criteria the government is using to determine that a terrorist, a criminal, someone who has abducted people, kidnapped people, destroyed communities. I don't know what the yardstick is, for determining whether they are repentant or not. And the programs that they take them through, we don't really know for sure what it is that is the measures they are using to de-radicalize these people, to make sure that they have truly changed their ways. Ordinarily, they ought to go to court, they ought to be convicted, they ought to go through the process, but a situation where they are being, rehabilitated and released into the society, it just creates further, an atmosphere of impunity. We also have a situation where these things are happening without a corresponding, attention on the victims of these Boko Haram activities. The internally displaced people are still there suffering and looking for how to survive. One would expect that, to enable there to be peaceful society, these people will also be taken care of. But you find that they are not taken care of. And most of these victims are women, most of them are girls, most of them are children. And most of these women, now looking at the hurdles that women go through, most of these women are unskilled, they are uneducated, not because they don't want to go to school or they don't want to be, learn any skill, but for cultural reasons, for religious reasons, they are not allowed, to go out to acquire all these things that they need. And so you find that we have a lot of women who are very young. There are a lot of young widows now, and then young widows who do not really have a means to survive. They don't even know how to take care of themselves enough, but they are left with the responsibility to take care of their children. And a situation where a woman who is not able to even care for her children and provide for their needs, you find that the children become, they resort to all kinds of things to survive. Then looking at other hurdles, of course, to women's empowerment in Nigeria, we look at the issues of the laws that we have, starting with the Child Rights Act, because of course, before someone becomes a woman, you start from being a girl. Now we have the Child Rights Act that intends to help the women, the girls rather, to protect them so that they are not subjected to child marriage and things like that, because there's a prescribed age for them. Once they are 18, before they can be married, they are not to be subjected to child labor and all that. But you find that 11 states in Nigeria are yet to adopt those laws for religious reasons, for cultural reasons, for ethnic reasons. And so it leaves these girls at the mercy of society, at the mercy of culture. And so many girls are not going to school because they are not allowed to go to school for cultural reasons. They are subjected to marriage from as early as 10 years old, sometimes even before they are 10. And for some that are lucky, they even have their parents' consent. In other instances, someone somewhere just comes, abducts them, takes them away, converts them, change their religion, and you find that there are different levels of justification for these things. These are situations that do not allow these girls to grow into women who are able to contribute meaningfully to the society. Nigeria also ranks at 122nd out of 144 countries in closing the gender gap. The country is really slow in doing that. In Nigeria, you find that 1 in every 3 women have suffered physical violence at some point or the other. Either they've suffered physical violence or sexual violence. And then the culture, virtually every tribe, every culture in this country does not, they do not allow women to be at par with men. They are more inferior. And in some cases, you find that women are even deemed as property to be inherited, just when a man is deceased and his wife is there, particularly if they were married, through the culture, the customary law marriages, the woman herself can actually be inherited along with his property. These kinds of situations do not allow women to achieve their full potential. Then women suffer a lot of political exclusion. A lot of women in Nigeria try to join the political atmosphere to see how they can represent their constituencies, they can represent the interests of women. But this is not so. For example, the current National Assembly, where we have the lawmakers, out of 109 senators, we have only about 11 women. And then at the House of Representatives stage, where we have 360 members, we have barely 13 women in the whole of that. So we find that the legislature is male-dominated, 95%. And so you see that women are not there at the decision tables. And when decisions are being made that regard women, there are no women to stand up to speak and represent women fairly. Currently, there's a constitutional amendment going on. And at this constitutional amendment, the 5 bills were, proposed to enhance different rights of women, allow them to represent, their constituencies and interests. But all 5 bills were thrown out, which caused a lot of pandemonium, a lot of protest and all that. At the end of the day, all we hear is that the House of Reps will look at it. But if the Senate still doesn't look at it, these bills will not get into the new constitution. So this is really a hurdle. It's going to further make women not to be able to achieve their full potentials. One of the bills seeks to help women to have a constituency. For example, as a married woman, if a woman who is married wants to represent her state, for example, she faces currently a challenge of which state she can represent. Would it be her husband's state or would it be her state? Many times people will actually argue to say that she is no longer, a member of her state because she's married and belongs to another state. So she has to represent the state of her husband. While the people in her husband's state will also argue to say she's not originally from there, she cannot represent their interests. There's a dilemma here, and a bill was sent to the National Assembly to try and change such a bill, but the legislators practically threw out that bill. So that dilemma remains. Another thing is that when a Nigerian man marries a woman outside of Nigeria, by just going through some formal process, the woman can become a Nigerian. The same does not apply for the women. And so you see that there are active legislations and laws that are further dominating and oppressing women and not allowing them to achieve their full potentials. Then we have the issues of economic disadvantage. If you want to run for office now, the price of tickets is very, very expensive, and women cannot afford to do these things. When another aspect is the issue of agriculture. Many women are in agriculture in Nigeria trying to, bring up farms and all that, but you find that less than 20% of women actually own farmlands. And so they are going to just be there to labor, but they are not able to acquire lands. There are some cultures where a woman cannot acquire land except her husband, she goes through her husband or a male figure in the society. These are things, these are hurdles that women are going through that do not allow them to achieve their full potentials. Currently, 49% of Nigerians are women. And when women are shut out of the system and not allowed to contribute their quota, you find that a lot of potential is untapped. There's a saying that says when you train a man, you train an individual. But when you train a woman, you train a community. This is true because the influence of the woman is really far-reaching. And so this program here, seeking to advocate for women's empowerment, is very crucial. We call on civil society groups to continue to pressure governments, particularly Nigerian government, to not just commit, verbally, not to just commit by talking and writing documents, but to actively implement policies. Also, companies need to begin to implement gender diverse, excuse me, they need to begin to incorporate, policies that bring, about gender diversity. And then the media has to continue to keep, on the front burner, these kinds of issues. And when there are few men who understand these issues and advocate and help women, the he for she's, we feel that when they come up, when they do things like this to help women, then they should be encouraged. When governors, for example, make their cabinet comprised of women to, be able to represent interests of women, such men need to be commended to encourage other men. For now, I'll stop here and enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you so much, Fatima, for giving us a great overview of the obstacles that Nigerian women face in economic empowerment. Our next speaker is supposed to be Mr. Yakubu Bawa of Nigeria. He was on the call earlier, but it seems that he might have had to drop off. So I think what we'll do is we'll move on to the next speaker. And then if Mr. Bawa is still not on the call, then we can play a pre-recorded video of him. So our next speaker is Ms. Mariam Ibraheem. Ms. Ibraheem is a well-known Sudanese religious freedom activist. Born to a Muslim father and an Ethiopian Orthodox mother, she was raised in her mother's faith and eventually married a Christian man. Sudanese authorities arrested Ms. Ibraheem in May 2014 after one of her relatives reportedly accused her of committing adultery for marrying a Christian man, as such is not considered a valid marriage. The court charged her with apostasy from Islam and sentenced her to death, but thanks to international pressure, she was released. She currently advocates for religious freedom and gender issues. Ms. Ibraheem, we welcome you to share your testimony now.
Thank you, Cindy. I really appreciate your effort, guys, on highlighting these issues. And as today, International Day for the Right to the Truth concerning the gross of human rights violation. It's so important that we always continue discussing and speaking up on this concerning issues that related to gender equality and rights of women, and in the area of a climate of insecurity. And in Sudan, you can see this, the protest is continuing, and most of the many situations that women are more be looking as, because their gender identity, they are more vulnerable for sexual violence and physical violence and kidnapping. And it is really become very concerning. And I believe that it's not going to stop even after the government is changed. With the government, it's still continuing. And the women are trying really to force their way to be heard and to continue raising their voice, and they deserve to be heard. And we still have many issues in Sudan. It's really a very challenging situation, and particularly when it comes to our country is under Islamic Sharia law. So it's always women are being looked up at as a second, I mean, their voice is not really even considered, even at the court, when you go witness, 2 women equal 1 man. So we have long way to go, despite all these legal challenges and also, women face. Even though we have some women are present, like at the court and the judges, we have female judges, but still the issues of the related to the way people really think in education system, like all those people just practicing the thing that they learn. So, it is very challenging for human rights advocates as also. We have people are trying to speak up and report these issues, but they end up being blocked either by the government. Sometimes they consider being looked up as a hateful or a negative, or without any ground for that argument. Like when you come to speak about issues that related to family law, Islamic Sharia law, you always hard to put up words. So to have understanding exactly what it means, what does that mean? So, and for us, really stories and things that as people experience, it's had so much power. I really appreciate all the effort you guys do, Jubilee Campaign. one of the things that is more concerning for women on religious minority, we do always have this problem, like when you go to court and you actually like trying to get divorced or something like that. That's always very hard for women, especially they don't actually identify, they don't even believe this domestic violence thing exists, because by in Sharia law, a man have right to treat his wife and discipline her any way he can, including even beating, including, you know, financial restriction on their wives, and beside of also, and in case of religious minorities like non-Muslim married to Muslims, there's too many discrimination in that area. And if it's happening, excuse me, you have you're a Muslim, you're a Christian mother, sorry, and you married to a Muslim, your children will suffer consequences of if this happened to us, like in my case and in many other cases. So they face discrimination, and even violence makes them vulnerable for any punishment. Sometimes also in case of marriage. So, you know, the nature of the law of nature is that we're a Muslim country, and then this Christian live in the country. If a Muslim man fall in love with a Christian, if a Muslim girl fall in love with a Christian man, he have to convert to Islam. And even though after the apostasy law is abolished, we have like now 2 cases that are really very serious now on the court. It's the same issues that, you know, men have to convert to Islam, but it's still not accepted by the community. And the death penalty or the punishment can be held by the father, family members, or community members. Like they have an authority to do that. And then we don't have any ground, we don't have any law that to protect this individual. Like in many cases that involve honor killing, the government actually and the court and the way that the case is being handled by the police, it shows that there's really wide gap on protection for women, because they don't take anything serious, and they think that, yeah, the father have right to do that to his daughter, or the family members have right to do that. The community members have right to do that. In many areas, that's really I would say, I would call this the traditional custom beside the Sharia law also. So, and on a conflict related, you know, area that's like in Darfur, Nuba Mountain, you know, most of this are religious minority people who, you know, they don't really practice Islamic faith. So the rape issues and kidnap and killing of women and families is something really never even been investigated or never even been brought up during the peace agreement signing between the rebels and the government. So you can see there's so much really, you know, hidden context, and people don't really, you know, care much about these issues. And this is not just actually just as government. Even when international community involved, there's not any serious investigation like this big series of crime of rape happening in Darfur, and it happened for women on the street during the protest since 2019. There's not any further investigation. There's not any justice being brought up to those girls. We have one of the very painful experience happened a few weeks ago. One of the girls being raped by the police officer. So there's like people are showing up these issues. Like people are speaking up, but there's no ear to hear. So this is really very important, you know, issues need to be discussed during, and even just not, and to be questioned by the international community, by the world leader. Like, I really hope that when any case came up like that, we all needed to stop and listen, because some of these stories don't come to the light, don't be here. Nobody know about it. Nobody really heard about these issues. And it's normal, become a part of, as I said, the way of law of nature, where countries that live in the Sharia law. So that's something normal. I don't think it's right. And Sudan and many of those countries are part of United Nations. They signed the Declaration of Human Rights Law, and they should be held accountable for any violation. And we can't blame it on the rebels or gang as they try now to do this, but I believe it's the government's responsibility to protect their citizens. And there's really missing pieces on a case of like protection. There's no any law that to protect certain individual from any harm that face them or violence that they face, even women or young girls, or including even like in my case, my lawyers have to be forced to leave Sudan, because they're not safe. It's so important that the advocacy for those issues is very important. And I think that's my statement for today. Thank you. I hope it's helped.
Thank you so much, Mariam. I'm pretty sure every Sudanese girl looks up to you as a great advocate for women's rights. I would like to take this moment to just remind our attendees that if you have any questions, you could place them in the bottom right-hand corner in the Q&A box, and we will try to get to them at the end. It seems that Mr. Bawa has returned, so I will go ahead and introduce him. Our next speaker is Mr. Yakubu Bawa, chairman of the Yos branch of the Nigeria Bar Association, a membership organization based on the promotion and protection of human rights, rule of law, and good governance in Nigeria. In his capacity as chairman of the Yos branch, Mr. Bawa specializes in human rights, religious freedom, and public interest. Mr. Bawa, we now welcome you to share your remarks.
Thank you so much. Indeed, I'm highly grateful and delighted to be part of today's proceedings, particularly this program. Like I rightly mentioned and introduced, Yakubu Bawa is my name. And also I'm, in addition, the director of Defenders of Freedom Initiative International. Let me say this quickly. I listened to the submissions and also the presentation of Fatima, and I would like to register my concurrences. That is to say that I agreed with all that she submitted. And I just want to add a few or three remarks, which for me, they are quite fundamental. But one thing that is very crucial for most of us to know, I'm going to do my presentation by making or laying a foundation to give you a background of Northern Nigeria. I came from the far north, we call it in Nigeria the far north, where Islam is the majority and also the main religion there. Let me say this, that when you're talking about the rights of women and a girl child, it's important to note that in Northern Nigeria, we are being bedeviled by many factors. One, we're talking about issues that has to do with religion, issue that has to do with culture. And these two factors have played significant role in affecting or also shaping at the same time the life and the destiny of women and also a girl child as far as this region is concerned. And that affects the entire Northern Nigeria. It is important also to state at this juncture that because of the background in the Northern Nigeria, Islam, we have a mixed, that's what we call, as a lawyer that I am, I call it, we have a main problem that I call legal pluralism. And when you talk about that concept, you're talking about in Northern Nigeria, you have multiple laws that governs people's and regulate people's life. For instance, in the North, you have the Sharia law, and also you have the civil or the received English law. And with this, you begin to have a lot of challenges, and people ask questions that in northern Nigeria, you tend to ask a question, which law really governs the life and also the transactions or whatever the people do, within which particular context are you going to really describe that? For instance, in Kano State or in Katsina State, I'm talking about the far north, in Zamfara State, in 1999, 2000, Zamfara State actually promulgated Sharia law. And at that time, President Obasanjo was in power. And we stood against it to say, come, Nigeria is a secular state. And that being a secular state, can you really come to terms with what this person or this governor wanted to do at that time? Because the Constitution is the grundlaw, is the supreme law. And the Constitution particularly says in section 1 or 2 of the Constitution that says any law that is void and is inconsistent with the Constitution rather is void to its inconsistency. That is to say that even though you want to talk about Sharia law in Nigeria, it must be subservient to the Constitution because Constitution is the grand rule. So we found ourselves in that particular dilemma at that time. And a lot of people, lives were being lost and wasted. A lot of properties were wasted because there was a lot of agitations and people revolted. Their lives were being killed in Kaduna State because of Sharia at that time. Now, the average northerner in Nigeria find it difficult to really understand that Constitution is the ground rule. For him, Sharia or the Sharia legal system, or the Islamic legal system rather, is the prominent, is the supreme, and is that particular law that governs he or her life. So that is the issue, and I'm trying to look at that is just to make one or two interventions or points when talk about legal pluralism. So people find it difficult to say which law actually governs their life. Now, I'm trying to juxtapose it with the topic within the discourse. Now, we have a lot of issues. We're talking about insecurity and connecting it with the right of women, right of girl child, and at the same time, how do we empower women in this particular era of insecurity in Nigeria? The issue of insecurity in Nigeria is multidimensional, where it's not only you would have a problem that is a dilemma, it's a trilemma, because we deal with banditry, we deal with Boko Haram insurgency, we also deals with issue that has to do with other parts of Islamic extremism and so on and so forth. Now, the question is this. In Nigeria today, a woman doesn't, particularly in the north, woman doesn't have a right. And for me, I thank God, our sister that just concluded her presentation, she's of Sudan extraction. And lucky to say this, our penal code in northern Nigeria was a complete copy of what is obtainable in Sudan, in that country. And within that context, she knows her background from a Muslim to Christianity, the right of women in Islam. Now, that has been the issue. That a woman, for instance, I have handled a lot of cases where you have a girl child, and that girl child, she's maybe, probably, in most cases, from the Christian background. And here we are, that same girl child has been forcefully converted into Islam. And that girl child has been forced into that religion. She has been taken out of school, where if she would be allowed, or she had been allowed, she would have been educated so that she would be empowered to be a better person in her life and also face her future. And when you come to address that issue, the next thing that will come is that she has converted to Islam. And you begin to ask questions. She's a minor because she has not reached the age of majority or accountability for her to decide. And the Constitution says that for a child that is, or any person who intends to change or convert from one religion to another, or change his or her religion, provided is yet an adult, he can do that through his parents, or what you call a guidance. Now, the question will always be, and that has been the issue, to say that, she has converted into Islam, and now that she's a Muslim, the parents have no right over her. We have a lot of cases where girls have been taken out of school, forcefully converted and forced into particular religion. Not only that, forced into marriage. And where you talk about marriage, you said, she is a child. They said, no. In Islam, even if she's 16 years, she can marry. She's not a child. But in this context, our penal code said at that time, any person that is forced into marriage, which is beyond the age, who is within 14 years, you can even charge that person for a rape. And that is what the law says. Now, these are issues that I've raised earlier in my presentation to say that is what we call, that is the issue of legal pluralism. Now, at that particular point, or the scenario I just painted and I've presented to you, what law will govern this particular conflict that just ensued? I'm not just giving a hypothetical case. These are issues that we deal with and we grapple with daily. Now, a child can marry. That is what Islamic law says. But another thing, another dimension will be mentioned. But the problem is that a lot of states in northern Nigeria find it difficult to domesticate that child, that act, because to them is antithetical to Islam and is antithetical to the culture of the people. That a girl at the age of 13, 14 can enter into marriage contract. Then why are you going to domesticate a law that says that until that person reaches the age of majority? In fact, Child's Rights Act says that where someone forces or sponsors that marriage, he is liable to imprisonment and option of fine.
Mr. Bawa, it seems that you were cut off. Maybe you're having some technical difficulties. But I would like to thank you for at least using your background as a barrister for giving us some insight into the legal obstacles, not just the situation, but what causes them, states not implementing laws or domesticating them into their own legislation. And so I think we are going to, Barrister, you're back. Would you like to conclude briefly?
Yeah, I'm trying to round up actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So like you rightly mentioned, these are legal hurdles. These are obstacles until for us in northern Nigeria, for women and also a girl child to be free, one, not only to practice her religion or to experience what the Constitution says, right to freedom of religion and belief, until we come to terms with these existential realities that we must amend and enact laws or legislation that will protect women and girl child. If not, whatever we're going to do in this country, Nigeria, as far as Nigeria is concerned, nothing is going to happen. And this issue of insecurity, Boko Haram, that we see a lot of our girls are already in their camps. They have been taken to far that you can't even trace them. We still have a lot of them that we are still struggling to see if we can secure their release. And they are still in captivity. And this has to do with the hurdles that we're talking about. Our laws actually in this country, they are laws that are not laws that we can say that at this one make bold to say that they can protect the right of women and those girl child or empower them. So these are issues that we struggle with and we try to present before the National Assembly, our legislators, so that they can see reason to make laws that will protect them. Thank you for the kind indulgence, and I think I will stop here.
Thank you so much. I couldn't agree with you more that legislation is really the solution, but not just legislation, but making sure that it is implemented accordingly in states. Yeah. Our next speaker is Mr. Joseph Jansen, the founder of Voice for Justice, a Christian organization with a mission to advocate for religious freedom in Pakistan. Mr. Jansen was born in Pakistan himself, but has since moved to the Netherlands, where he works in a pharmaceutical company. Meanwhile, he conducts lobby work and advocacy with the United Nations, European Union, and national governments to promote religious freedom and highlight the issue of religious persecution in Pakistan. Mr. Jansen, will turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Sydney, for inviting me such a wonderful event, and especially talking about overcoming hurdles of the woman on International Day. And one of the biggest issue that being Pakistani or in Pakistan that we are facing is the forced conversion in Pakistan. And The minority girls and women are kidnapped for being easy targets, and the minorities lack financial sources and political influence. They do not equally enjoy the rights to a fair trial, which is a barrier to their access to justice. The perpetrators mostly get away with their crimes in the case involving offenses like abductions, forced conversion, child marriage, sexual violence, and etc. Due to their manipulation of their criminal and justice system, they mostly abduct underage minority girls, mostly with the intention of committing rape, and present fabricated evidence in the court of law to cover up their crimes, resorting the certificate of faith conversion in marriage. This is what happened from now years in Pakistan, and every day or every month, year, we see that the cases increase. According to many reports, thousands of the girls get forcefully convert to Islam and get raped, and some of them like come to the court, and when they come to the court by the fabricated fake evidence presented in the court, sometime court send those girls to the with the abductors. And this is the outrageous. This is what the biggest discrimination, and minorities face challenges in the society. When these incident happens, our activists, local activists go after to help them, and they also face several challenges. Sometimes they face threats from the facilitator of the abductors because of the religious card, but they use that the minor girls has accepted Islam and she has converted to Islam, and then when they come to the police station, police kind of support to them. When they come to their madrasa, their religious center, they get this easily certificate of the conversion, and when it comes to the court, they easily get trial or justice in their favor. That's a really sad thing for Pakistani minorities. And to end this, we as Voice for Justice in March, 7th of March, we did a very big press conference in Pakistan and presented our charter of demands involving child marriage, sexual abuse, and abductions, and several other are undertaken are theirs. So what we demand is a passage of the bill to amend the Child Marriage Restraint Act to ensure that the minimum marriageable age is set at 18 years for both boys and girls, and the marriage of minor girls is declared null and void. Passage of the bill introducing safeguard against the forced faith conversion in conformity with international human rights standards, and abduction of the major to address the social, economic, and political power structures that allow the conversion to take place with impunity. Enforcement of the existing provisions of the domestic laws, such as sections 375, 367, and 493A and 498B and 466 of the Pakistan Penal Code to protect girls and women against rape and forced marriage. Implementation of the existing laws, such as the Punjab Protection of the Women Against Violence Act 2016, with the establishment of the of provision of adequate funding. The proceeding of the press conference was well received among communities and was widely published by national and international print, digital, and digital media. However, the electronic media, particularly the most vast news channel of Pakistan, Geo News, covered the event, which helped to widely circulate the demands made by the participants. It is very important to engage diverse stakeholders in advocacy that represent different groups, including women, minorities, Muslims, and human rights institutes. The involvement of the different stakeholders add the value to the case of minority women's rights and strengthen the efforts of their empowerment. The activists engaging the advocacy do face challenges. However, their passion of commitment toward making contribution to implementing the human rights and advancing the rights of freedom keep them motivated, and concerted efforts for the rights and hope for change can help make difference in the lives of people. So thank you very much for your precious time. This is what happened, and this is what we have presented in Pakistan. We hope that in coming future, we, with the parliamentarians and with other social activists and human rights activists, have some positive result on it, and hopefully Pakistan will make the proper legislation to end forced conversion and forced marriage and sexual violence in Pakistan. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much for sharing, Mr. Jansen. I read somewhere that human rights organizations use the statistic that every year 1,000 Pakistani girls from faith minority communities are abducted. And thank you for sharing about the charter and the press conference that you held. I would now like to move on to our last speaker, Dr. Janet at Buckingham. She is the Director of Global Advocacy at the World Evangelical Alliance and the Executive Editor of the International Journal for Religious Freedom. In her other capacity, she is a professor at Trinity Western University with a research focus on religious freedom legislation, both in Canada and globally. Dr. Buckingham has resided in France, South Africa, and England, the last of which location is where she developed an interest in applying Christian principles to public policy, which she does also as director of the Trinity Western University's Laurentian Leadership Center. Dr. Buckingham, I think, will be speaking about some legal steps that can be taken and possible solutions. So we will now turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Sydney. And a warm greeting to all participants. We've heard from my colleagues of the intersectionality of religion and gender in the disempowerment of women and girls. We started with a general description of how gender and form vulnerabilities work in tandem with the image of motive, means, and opportunity. Then we heard some global patterns of how men and women of faith experience religious persecution very differently, along with how this combination of form violations with infringements of gender norms can actually make faith communities complicit in the damage this gender-specific religious persecution produces. All of this increases our need for attentiveness to each of our roles, whether we are local faith actors or policymakers. We have heard of the challenges for women from religious minorities in Nigeria, Sudan, and Pakistan. It is no accident that Christian girls in Nigeria are abducted from schools. This action makes parents fearful of sending their girls to school. This keeps them from education, a fundamental necessity for economic empowerment. And what happens to these girls? They are forced to change religion and become child brides, or they are made sex slaves. They're alienated from their families, their communities, and any hopes and dreams they may have for the future. CSW 61, Agreed Conclusion 6 sub C, speaks to the importance of safety for women and girls in the school environment. We need to echo that in light of abduction of women and girls, forced religious conversion, and forced marriages. CSW 61, Agreed Conclusion 5, speaks to violence against women. The governments of countries where this is happening must be called to account for failing to protect vulnerable religious minority girls from abduction, particularly at school. While this item speaks to intersectionality of discrimination, it does not specifically reference religion or being part of a religious minority as an area of intersectionality. We encourage CSW to recognize this as an area of intersectional discrimination. We are deeply concerned that women continue to be targeted in armed conflict situations for rape and sexual slavery. This is of particular concern as we appear to be facing escalated conflict globally. The Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief recently released his annual report to the Human Rights Council. He particularly raised concern over the ways religious minorities are targeted in times of conflict. This includes exploiting religious tensions to strategically divide communities. He also commented on state and non-state actors who target religious or belief identities to inflict harm on minorities, deploying tools such as violence, intimidation, and discriminatory legislation to restrict their human rights or uproot or eradicate a community. The Special Rapporteur notes many situations of armed conflict where religious minorities have been restricted in access to resources and had their land seized. This creates situations of food insecurity and forced migration. Women, particularly those with children, are in vulnerable situations with no opportunities for economic empowerment. The Special Rapporteur also notes, and I'm quoting here from the report, women from religious or belief minority communities often face additional gendered socioeconomic barriers in seeking means of subsistence in times of conflict and insecurity, including discrimination in accessing employment based on their gender and faith, where actors may invoke religious precepts to justify such treatment. The Special Rapporteur specifically mentioned Nigeria, Myanmar, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Sudan as countries where there have been forced conversion, usually of women and often in the context of forced marriage. I'll turn now to looking at what countries can do to ensure that religious minority women and girls are protected. First, we are aware that many donor countries integrate a gender perspective as part of development assistance programs. We encourage these countries to also ensure that freedom of religion or belief is integrated into this analysis as well. This can best be accomplished by ensuring meaningful participation by women and girls who have faced this double discrimination and vulnerability in designing, assessing, and implementing these programs. We urge that countries be called to account when they have failed to protect religious minorities. The Special Rapporteur, for example, called out Pakistan and Sudan in this regard, and we have heard our speakers mention these particular situations as well. He first notes, in late 2021, Pakistan rejected a bill designed to address forced conversion of Hindu and Christian girls and women, claiming that if it passed, the bill would make minorities more vulnerable to communal violence. In Sudan, after non-state actors attacked a church in Gezira state, state security reportedly said that rebuilding it would damage social harmony. The Special Rapporteur notes that Pakistan has also restricted funding from outside Pakistan directly received by aid organizations or human rights organizations, and the reason cited was foreign influence. This has a disproportionate impact on vulnerable minorities. Here I note women in particular from religious minorities. With current military conflict on the rise, there have been mass migrations of minorities, particularly religious minorities. And we call on receiving countries to recognize these migrants and give them opportunities to work and earn a living. This includes women as well as men. If men can work, women are often left in refugee camps with no economic opportunities and subject to violence. So women must also be given opportunities in order to empower them economically. I thank you all for your interest in this subject and hope that in the question and answer time, we can dialogue together as to how to move these issues forward in some positive directions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Buckingham, for really tying together all of the three countries that we talked about, Nigeria, Sudan, Pakistan. You really sort of packaged it into a little topic of how can we move things forward. I would like to thank all of our distinguished speakers for sharing their personal experiences and their expertise regarding the intersection of gender discrimination and religious persecution. Before turning over to the Q&A, I would like to announce that Jubilee Campaign is releasing a report titled Obstacles to Women's Economic Empowerment in Nigeria, Pakistan, and Sudan to coincide with today's event. And my colleague will be posting the link in the chat box below so that you can see. And we're now going to take the rest of the time to answer any questions that the audience may have, which can be submitted clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom window. I do have some questions myself, so I think I'll go ahead and start off. This is more of a general question anyone can answer. What role does freedom of religion or belief have in empowering women? If anyone would like to take that question.
Okay, if I may start so that others can build on it. Well, freedom of religion or belief has a very serious role to play, especially in Nigeria, because women are hindered from doing many things for religious reasons. Most of the times, culture is hid under religion, and vice versa. And so something that has come up and reoccurred in most of the conversations is talking about child marriages, for example. Many child marriages happen under the guise of religion. Now, if girls are allowed to go to school, that alone gives them the opportunity to have that sense of self-worth. When they have self-worth, they are able to, contribute meaningfully to the society. They are able to inspire social change. Because you need to really be well educated to be able to meaningfully, engage nationally and internationally. And of course, issues of child marriage also have effects on the health of these girls, like the VVF that comes when those children try to give birth, they have VVF. Automatically, those kind of women, those kind of girls, you no longer think of empowering them, you're thinking of how to make them survive. Because at that point, what is ultimate is their health. And so the role that freedom of religion or belief plays is that, one, at least, it allows girls to be able to grow to full maturity. It allows parents to be able to invest in their children the way they want to and train their children, because many of these child brides, their parents really want them to go to school, particularly the ones that are abducted and forcefully converted. The parents will try to fight back most times, but you see, as they try to fight back, Sharia law comes to play and all those things come to play. And when these girls are married, most times they are not allowed to go to school. So education, I think, in summary, what I want to say is that freedom of religion or belief has a great role in allowing girls and women to be educated. And of course, also, the issue of abductions as well, like children that were abducted from the Chibok abductions, the Dapchi abductions in Nigeria, you find that Boko Haram keeps saying that these girls, we said, don't go to school, you're going to school, and that's why we're abducting you. And they abduct these children and turn them to sex slaves and all that, marry off some of them and all that. So if freedom of religion or belief is in place and is respected, all these issues of abductions, because many of the Chibok parents, some of them died, some of them came up with all kinds of sicknesses and all that. And so it has an influence on society and discourages other parents from sending their children to school. So
thank you so much, Fatima, and thanks for raising the issue of education. One thing that our report mentions is that, especially in the case of Nigeria, education is a main preemptive measure against child marriage because it empowers women and it teaches them and that. But also in Nigeria, for example, the abductions that happen usually take place in educational institutions. And then to sort of exacerbate the situation, education is one of the most affected aspects of a girl's life when she is forced into child marriage, because a lot of these girls, they're forced into marriage and then they have children, and then sometimes their husbands never let them return to school, and sometimes simply having so many children and having to take care of them prevents them from returning to education. I know in our research of Nigeria and Pakistan, a lot of these girls do hope to return to school, but they are never given the opportunity. And so someone in the chat raised a question to me that I would like to share with you all. Why do we hear about women and girls being forcibly converted and married off, but not men and boys? So I guess the question is, why are women the primary targets? And this is open to anyone.
Yeah, shall I take this question for Pakistan? Yes, in Pakistan, actually, it's very easy target, and most of the time, it's only, I think, 99%, I would say, it happens with the minor girls and minority girls. And that's why we are fighting for, because the real attention of the abductor is not to convert to Islam to any minor girls, but having the misuse of her, like raping her, sexually abuse her, or fulfilling what he wants to abuse her. So that's why in Pakistan, most of the time they target minor girls in order to harass and rape them. And this is what happened. And unfortunately, after that, when they go to the madrasas, like their religious centers, they get their religious certificate and convert them to Islam, present them to in the court. So Islam allow them to marry in an underage marriage. And that's why we are fighting that Pakistan should make the proper law, a legislation which ends the minor girls. And like if Islam or Pakistani government won't make any legislation, that means they are allowing minor girls to be raped by the abductors. And they do it all the time. And this is that's why there are not any men in our community forcefully get converted to Islam. That's the only reason I would say.
Thank you. And yeah, in our report, we noted that, a lot of state actors, courts and judges and police are complicit in the crimes because they either refer to Islamic laws as justification for the marriage of the girl child, but also we noticed in a lot of cases in Pakistan that when a girl's family goes to the police to report that their daughter is missing, that they believe that she was kidnapped, that sometimes the police refuse to file a case, refuse to even do any sort of investigation, which sort of nips the whole justice process in the bud. And so I'm going to move on to another question. What legal reforms would strengthen the rights of women in Nigeria and Sudan? I know, Mr. Jansen, you already spoke a little bit about Pakistan. If you have any more you'd like to share, but for Nigeria and Sudan, what type of legal reforms do you see as having a potential positive impact on women's economic empowerment, social empowerment, and that type of thing?
Who should go first?
You can if you'd like to, Fatima.
Okay, so for Nigeria, I know that we already started. There's a Child's Right Act that prescribes 18 as the basic minimum age for marriage. So that automatically solves the child marriage issues. But the problem is that I think about 11 or 12 states have refused to adopt those laws into their state laws, and it's mainly for religious reasons and cultural reasons. So beyond legal reforms, I think even implementation of those laws are key. Secondly, on the issue of legal reforms, we also have the aspect of enhancing the rights of women, making sure that, for example, affirmative action, we have more women at the decision table. You know, when the issue of women's rights, I mean, the women's rights bills, most of them that were thrown out during the constitutional review, there were some arguments that came up, and some women said, we're not asking to give us automatic seats, because then it makes it look like we're receiving handouts. But we're saying, give us that opportunity to be able to compete with the men at the same level playing ground, so that we know that, okay, we were voted into office, and then we have rights to do, you know, whatever we need to do. So we need laws that, you know, loosen.
Seems Fatima might be having some technical issues, so we'll thank her for her remarks. And then, oh, Fatima, are you able to hear us? Or if not, I think we can go ahead and move on. One final question.
That allows women.
Oh, sorry, Fatima, you cut off. Would you like to continue your response? Oh, seems that she's having some technical difficulties. She's joining from Nigeria, and they seem to have some issue. Oh, now she's back. Fatima, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, sure. You cut off a bit, so if you'd like to finish your remarks. Oh.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I was talking about the issue of also allowing women, making laws that allow women to be able to compete at, you know, very, very level playing grounds, rather than asking for handouts from men, making it look like, okay, if women are not given express seats, like say, okay, give women 30 seats at the table, and then they make them, no, let it be that there are gender policies at the national level, state levels, and all the levels, policies that encourage gender diversity. And then not just at government levels, but at employment levels and at different levels of engagement. That's going to be very helpful.
Thank you. And Mariam, if you'd like to share, I asked what type of legal reforms you think would be necessary, and in your case in Sudan, what type of legal reforms do you think would improve the empowerment of women and girls?
Well, actually, it's more than just legal reform, because it's not just, you know, it's an issue of laws and things like that. Start with education for everyone. So, and then with Sharia law, I would say one thing, you know, under Sharia law, it's just impossible to have any law that protect girls, women, and religious minority, because and even though if there's a law, at the end the court have one references, and it's the Islamic Fiqh Academy. So, and as they go back to Sharia law, the age of marriage is 9. You know, there's no way you can be out. The other thing is that it's so important to understand how marriage is in Islam, or how marriage is in those countries. though there's no present for the girl or woman during the marriage process, it's done by the father and the imams, you know, or the legal guardian. So like the girl, in some many cases, they don't even be questioned whether they are interested in this marriage or not. So the education system is very important. And then, as you said, the judges or the police, they don't even investigate these issues. So there's not enough resources. There's no protection for those girls. They don't have any resources. If something happened, they don't have anybody like to report it to or to say this, what's happened to them is that. So there's too many different things really before, because when you just put a law, it's written, it just is not even really being applied in real life. Sometimes some of these countries, they just put up their constitution and their law just as a show, you know, but there's a lot of small details in real life people experience and people go through, they really don't even reach to come to the court. But and then again, I would say under Sharia law, it's impossible. It's impossible. And when we say Islamic Sharia law, we really not to try, because this is make lots of issues sometimes when you speak against Sharia law. And it's really, really big problem for too many issues, not just child marriage. But I'll focus on child marriage. As I said, there's no any protection for those girls. The way the marriage process, how it's done, the girls even have no reason to present. They don't need to be there. Somebody else in their behalf will do that. So in order for us to have any election, you have to change even through the process. So I don't know. Yeah, it's very complicated and very restricted process. So the girls have no presence in that place. So they don't have to provide like ID. They don't have to provide anything. So somebody else in their behalf will go through the process and sign off for the marriage. So that's number one thing. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mariam. And you made a good point that, you know, laws are just written down. You have to implement them to actually enact change. And it looks like Soraya in the chat raised a question. She said, religions have always valorized women's bodies and seek to control them. What steps are we taking to organize women to resist this in their own communities? Or what organizational actions are being taken to bring women together to advocate for their own rights within their communities, if anyone has a response?
So I will go ahead and say that not all religion really does that. So, and the main challenge is for Muslim communities and religious minority in Islamic countries. So that's one of the things. And because many of those Islamic countries that under Sharia law, and they have different constitution, and even so, if they written the constitution that following the international law, they started the headline for their constitution is according to Sharia law. So their constitution is according to Sharia law, and that's one of the things. Yeah, many challenges. That's one of the challenges area is that. And then if there's any place that is really have to advocate, there's too many human rights organizations, but I believe United, like Human Rights Council or United Nations are really not doing their part to follow up with these cases and this situation. So they're actually number one to be held responsible for protecting these individuals.
Thank you so much, Mariam. And then I guess we can take the last couple minutes to see if anyone has any final recommendations or calls to action in general in promoting religious freedom and women's rights, or with country specific. Does anyone have any final closing remarks or calls to action?
I'll just give the call to action to say that these are very important issues, and sometimes within the UN system, things get siloed and we deal with women's issues separately than freedom of religion or belief. And yet we need to take both into account. Women that are part of religious minorities are rights holders, and their human rights as women and as part of religious communities need to be taken into consideration together. And so I really urge the UN, and particularly because this is a side event to the CSW, to really realize the intersectionality and the double vulnerability and double discrimination here, and take steps to address that as a double vulnerability.
Thank you so much. I couldn't have said it better myself. I think we will round off the questions here. I want to thank all of our distinguished speakers for joining us. I know some of them had to pop off the call a bit early, and some weren't able to join personally, but did send in videos, and we thank them for that. Yeah, and I just thanks everyone, and thanks for all of our attendees for coming and for supporting this issue. So yeah, thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Mariam.
Yes, I would really say that women and girls are the foundation of the family. So when we have protection, or when they're protected, when they're educated, we'll have an educated children, and then generation. And so yes, despite all the differences we have, so the women are the foundation of the family and communities and countries. So yeah, and men have to play big roles on doing that. So putting the law and applying the law and protecting the vulnerable girls in every
You're absolutely
area.
right. Empower the women, you empower the entire community. These measures that we take to improve their situation doesn't just benefit them, it benefits all children, men and women alike. So thank you for those comments. And yes, I think we will close it there. So thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.